Greetings, everyone. I am very excited to be back in conversation today with my friend and sister astrologer, Jocelyn Star Feather. And Jocelyn is an astrologer, coach, visionary, founder of Sacred Planet, and she blends astrology, alchemy, magic, ancient wisdom, and shamanic practices to guide others in their journey of transformation. And we also share a very deep love and connection to Egypt in common. So thank you for being here today, Jocelyn.
Thank you so much, Heather, for the beautiful introduction. It is a joy and a pleasure to be here with you.
And I'm very excited about our topic for today, talking about astrological magic and alchemy. So before we get into unpacking that, what that means and how you work with that, can you talk a little bit about how you started down that path through your own time of spiritual awakening?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Beginning at the beginning. So, yes, I was, following the standard plan of life. I was following all the steps that you're meant to take. So, I went to school, I got my bachelor's degree, I got my master's degree, I got my good job in corporate finance, and I got married and, checking all those boxes. And so, I had been in corporate finance about 15 years, and I was moving up that corporate ladder, all seemed really good on paper. And I was celebrating the birth of my first daughter at the time that my spiritual awakening happened. Those two, the birth of my daughter and my spiritual awakening, are essentially the same, the same exact moment in my life. She certainly catalyzed something in me and awakened a part of my soul when she came through. So that was in 2010. And so I can remember sitting on the couch and holding her in my arms. And I think she was maybe 3 or 4 days old. And this completely new awareness just broke through in my consciousness, a realization that the path I had been following my whole life up till now had not been aligned with my soul. And that was particularly around my career. And I realized in that moment that I needed to start a very new and different life, and that I wanted to do it for her, that I
Mm.
wanted to model for her a very different path than what I had been shown as basically, this is the way, this is how you do it, it's the only way, right? And I wanted to show her that something more than that is possible. And with that knowing coming through, it was certainly a powerful moment, but it was a very destabilizing moment for me because I had no idea where to go from there. And really, I just focused on for the next several months, next couple of years, taking care of her and doing what I needed to do to, to be a good mom, as I was also learning to be a mother, which is such a big transition in our lives at the same time. But what I finally came to after being in, I went into a bit of a dark night of the soul at that time because I didn't know where to go with this information, but I knew that I had to change my path. And I knew that it would affect my marriage, and I knew that it would affect my career, and so many dominoes would be toppled. Um, so what I started to do was to research and read all that I could get my hands on about every different religion, all different world religions and spiritual traditions, because I thought, well, I'm asking these questions of why am I here? What am I meant to be doing? What is the meaning of all this? And I thought, okay, these religions and spiritual traditions, the answer must be here somewhere. And I had been raised Catholic, and I wasn't finding the answers there for sure at that time in my life. So what I found that spoke to me more than anything else was Native American indigenous wisdom and shamanic wisdom. And this just made sense to me when I found and started studying with a Native American elder in New Mexico, who I was so just through magic and synchronicities, got in touch with her. And I started a regular shamanic journeying practice where I would listen to a drum beat and let my consciousness go, and my guides would come in. I had never had any experience like that before, and it changed everything. It took me on magical pathways where I was really called by a mountain across from the East Coast to Taos, New Mexico, and had this experience of knowing that a mountain had called me there so that I could learn and be taught by those lands and by the elders there. And my life began to rearrange and come back into a very new order after that. But it was really that indigenous and shamanic wisdom that opened the pathway for me.
We were talking before the recording. It's so interesting that we both found ourselves in this time of crisis when I had my mystical experience and left my career as I'd known it. I was exploring and really in an incredibly difficult transition time. And that was synchronistically, it was a Mohawk medicine woman offering a program on shamanism that started me down this very different path of spirituality.
Mhm.
And part of what was powerful in her teachings was not only the art of shamanic journeying and that awareness that we both share that everything is conscious.
Yes.
So it you were communing with a mountain that called you across the country. And I ended up having these incredible, powerful experiences with animal allies and plant allies that were guiding me, healing me, supporting me. So it's so powerful. And I think you and I are understanding that astrology, as we move into the Aquarian age, needs to really transform and engage in more of these right brain ways of knowing and these spiritual, shamanic ways of knowing that tap into ancient wisdom. So,
Absolutely. Hmm.
talk more about how you integrate astrology and magic and alchemy and what you mean by magic.
Yes. So many directions I want to go all at once with this. So I'll I'll pick one and we'll go one by one because I'll just mention this. I was thinking as you were sharing that it's so beautiful how both of us have taken that knowing that everything is alive and intelligent and we are connected with all of it to our work with the planets, right? And our communications with the planets and opening those portals of conversation and how we can learn from them and really see them as these great cosmic intelligences in the sky. So that's a part of it, but I think we'll get to that even more a little later. I think I want to begin with this really important foundation related to magic, which is the concept that the way the universe actually works is through miracles, synchronicities, and magic. And I can tell more about my definitions for each of those just so we are all on a common ground. But I want to say here as this foundational piece that, we receive a lot of conditioning, and really the conditioning has been going on for 5,000 years or more, saying that magic isn't real, synchronicities are just a coincidence, miracles don't really happen very often. And these are illusions. These are false statements that we've been told and that have been, propagated and handed to us in our modern society. But actually, when we spend time in nature, when we contemplate the miracle of life, when we work with astrology or shamanism, I think we can tell quite clearly that the way the universe really operates is through miracles and synchronicity and magic. And these bring us back to the truth of ourselves, who we really are, how powerful we really are. This is something that we have known for lifetimes, and we've had lifetimes where we were deeply steeped in miracles and magic, and we're remembering now. So this is all coming back to us now. Now, thinking about what those each mean, miracle, synchronicity, and magic, I'll just say a little bit about that. So, a miracle is something that we didn't think it was possible, and then it happened. So we hear about miraculous healings. Somebody has a very serious disease, somebody has cancer, and suddenly it's gone, right? It's a miracle. Um, there's a beautiful quote from Charles Eisenstein where he says, I may not get this exactly right word for word, but it's something like, um, a miracle is something that seems impossible from one story, but actually we see that it is possible from another story. So
Mm.
actually what we need at this time is just to change our story, right? So that's speaking to this same truth that I believe life is a miracle. Scientists can't explain life. They can't explain how it actually got started on Earth. They can't explain exactly what happens at that moment of conception of a new child, right? This is something that is a miracle. So we are the living embodiment of a miracle. We're walking around every day as this miracle of life. And there are so many miracles that happen all around us every day. They may not be on the nightly news, but these miracles are happening. So that's one piece. Synchronicity is where we didn't know two things were connected, and suddenly we find out they're connected. And that can often be a breakthrough moment. Like I'm having a thought about a deep spiritual experience, and an eagle flies over and cries out, and emphasizes this liminal realm, this connection between all things, right? A synchronicity like that. And then magic. So magic is when we really claim our power as creator beings, because we can, astrology is actually a great example to kind of illustrate this. We could look at the astrological transits as, these things are happening to us. This Pluto transit is happening to me, right? It's causing these things in my life. And that's kind of taking a powerless stance. But magic tells us that we get to participate too. And our will and our intent and our desire is also a force. And so we can meet Pluto, or we can, commune with Jupiter, or whatever, the planetary forces may be, or outside of astrological magic, any of the natural forces of the universe. We can work with these forces. Basically, we're working with unseen forces to change the course of events or create a certain outcome that usually is more desirable, right? So I'll start there.
I am so excited about this conversation. This is great because it really, uh, a lot of my own synthesis is this Aquarian shamanic astrology that is about the consciousness of everything and how we can commune with the planets and we can participate with these transits so that we're in relationship with those energies rather than resisting them or feeling controlled by them. But in terms of what you're talking about, too, do you think another way of framing it or deepening the discussion of it is, well, for example, the Persian understanding of magic is sacred knowledge and ritual skill. And the Hermetic understanding of magic, which I love, is aligning our personal will with cosmic will.
I love that.
Because
Yes.
when it comes to magic, there are many who dabble in ways to work energetically or work with intention and their personal will to control external reality. But I think the way in which you're working, my understanding of how you're working with magic is similar to my own understanding of alchemy and how when we align our will with cosmic will, when we align the energy of Mars with Pluto, then we are empowered by that connection and collaboration with the energies of the cosmos.
Absolutely.
Tap into what David Clements would talk about as the subquantum field, or
Mhm.
in Egypt with biogeometry and Ibrahim Karim, they would talk about source field intelligence. And then we are working in alignment with and relationship with the energies, intelligence, and power of the cosmos.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And to add another layer to that is the concept that they want to work with us. Right. They've been waiting a long time, I feel, for us to remember and come back and start having conversations with them again. And I'm saying the planets. When I say they, I'm saying the planets in this case, and the stars,
Yes.
planets, big stars. You know, if we look at the Sanskrit texts, which are from at least 5,000 years ago, I believe probably much older. And, you know, there are always older oral traditions that were in place long before things were finally written down. But if we look at the Sanskrit mantras to the planets, they're incredibly beautiful, and they're so there's such a personalized quality of this conversation, this communication with the planets. For example, one of the mantras to Mars says, "Om Mars, bearer of welfare, we bow down to you." Mars, who let me see the exact wording of this. Oh, Mars, who holds and protects the womb of creation in his hands, and he wields light in his hands. So it's positioning Mars as the sacred masculine, the protector of the womb of all creation, right? And so there was clearly this, I see it as a conversational tone, right? Where we're in this together, we're working together, and we can call upon them, and they are always wanting to work with us, which I find so beautiful.
It is beautiful. And part of what you're tapping into, Jocelyn, from my perspective, is really what we knew in ancient times.
Exactly.
What
Yes.
we knew when we weren't in this part of the processional cycle where we get caught in forgetting
Mhm.
and caught in disconnection. And as you said, for about the last 5,000 years, we've been in the illusion of disconnection and the illusion of scientific materialism and the illusion that we live in a random universe. And we are now in this time of moving into higher consciousness, in this time of remembering.
Mhm.
We have this capacity to come back into relationship with all that is and be part of the oneness of all that is. And then, as you said, magic and miracles and synchronicities are the part of just the process of being in communion with these energies of the earth and sky.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel that the more we can surrender to the energies that are moving through and really let ourselves not try to analyze it, right? Not try to overthink it. You know, it's a stepping out of the thinking mind and more into the felt sense of what is needed here, more into what is my heart saying, then that is how we can step into that place of miracles and synchronicities where we're really living in that way. You know, I for many years now have kind of made it my goal to live shamanically, to live every day in a shamanic way where I'm tuned into the magic, and you can find it everywhere. It's around every corner.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And how do you work with that when you're working with other people in terms of tapping into that magic, that alchemy? And alchemy is really about transmutation, transformation, and how do we reclaim the true gold of who we are and that deeper understanding of our interconnectedness with all that is.
Yes. Well, that is the key. Alchemy is transformation, as you said, and you'll see this core theme running through all of the alchemical texts, which is about turning lead into gold. And, I think it's interesting that the medieval alchemists seem to go on a boondoggle down the physical route with that, where they were actually trying to turn physical lead into physical gold, which was very difficult or impossible. But the deeper and more ancient meaning of that concept of turning lead into gold is that we're taking the lead of our lives, we're taking our heaviest burdens, our wounds, our traumas, and we're going to work with that. And we're going to transmute that through, in the way that I work with it, the 7 stages of alchemy. And we're going to turn it into gold in a sense of spiritual gold, highest consciousness, feeling really connected in with the light, living as the light, living in this state of more freedom and liberation and joy and peace in our hearts. And so I love guiding people through that journey. That's really a core part of what I do in my work. And there's a beautiful process where we move through those 7 stages of alchemy. Now, those 7 stages are aligned with the chakras. They are aligned with the 7 traditional planets. And I can say more about that if that would be helpful to hear the detail on it. And what I have found too, and this is another thing you and I have in common, is we both take people to Egypt. We both have deeply studied Egypt. Through years and years of doing the alchemy, both on my own and with clients, I have found that certain Egyptian guides tend to show up very reliably at certain stages of alchemy as we move through. For example, Sekhmet will show up for many, many, many people when we're in the 3rd stage of alchemy with the solar plexus. And so
Mm.
I've learned now that we're going to bring her in from the beginning of that stage. She's our guide. She wants to be here again. The beings, the cosmic intelligence is wanting to work with us. Sekhmet wants to come in and help us and assist us with amplifying our personal power, our agency, our conviction around what we truly believe, right? And that's what we do I'm jumping ahead to the 3rd stage because it's such a powerful and fiery one. But if it would be helpful, I could walk through those stages,
That'd
starting.
be great. And the connections to the planets.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first stage of alchemy is called calcination, and we begin at the root chakra, and we work with the planet Saturn. Now, the Egyptian guide I have found who appears at this stage is Anubis, which I find very interesting. So at this stage, we need to identify our heaviest burden, our deepest wound that we've been carrying for a really long time and that we're ready to clear. And so we have conversations with Saturn about that to get really clear on that. Saturn is known as the lead, actually. He is known to be heavy. He brings obstacles to help us learn and grow and build our character, to help us get on the right path. So he understands this, starting with the density, starting with the burdens that we carry. Interestingly, Anubis at this stage is our Egyptian guide. Anubis is in the Egyptian text, he is the one that helps with the embalming, and he actually helps us to move from this physical dense state into the light. He opens the path for us to release from the density of the physical form. So that's why I find that he shows up there. Now, in the way that I work with people at this stage, we create a sigil. So this is where we're getting into the astrological magic from the beginning. So a sigil, in this case, in the way that we're using it in the first stage of alchemy, is a powerful tool that either me, if I'm doing this work, or my client, if they're doing that work, I will guide them through creating and crafting and drawing this sigil in a way so that it holds their subconscious association with that burden and that wound that they're ready to clear. So they create a sigil and it
Can
holds
you
all.
explain what a sigil is?
Yes. And I will just show this really cool book that I got in London that gives just as an example of what a sigil might look like. It's a great book as well, The Study Sigils. A sigil is a symbol that that you draw. And it's very important for each of us to draw our own sigils, okay, because we need to put our energy into it. There are many different ways at arriving at how you would draw that sigil. Um, you can it would be kind of complicated to explain the process, but essentially you're putting your subconscious into that sigil and you're making a drawing with your own hands, with your own, pen or pencil, that then is going to carry the energy of that which you want to work with. Now, a sigil can be used to clear things out of our lives, which is how we're using it in this alchemy in the first stage. You could also alternatively draw a sigil for something you want to bring into your life.
Mm.
So it can be used in a lot of different ways. It's very versatile and it depends on your intention and it depends what you're putting into it and then what you do with it. So in this case, for the first stage of alchemy, we draw a sigil. Each of my clients would draw a sigil to represent that wound, that burden. And that sigil holds a deep, deep subconscious meaning for them. And this is where the magic really can happen because, we can work with our wounds in a cognitive way. We can work with it even in a spiritual or energetic way where we're doing a past life regression to clear and heal what happened that created that wound, or cognitive based therapy where we're, coming into a new understanding of why that wound is there and how we can relate to it. But this is different. This is working on a very subconscious level where we're drawing this sigil. It holds all the subconscious meanings associated with that wound and that burden that we carry that often we don't even know what a lot of that material is, but it goes into the sigil, right? This is part of the magic. And
Can
then
I just add to that? Because I
yeah,
think that's so important what you're saying, because we know that even though we think we can make shifts or change our thoughts and change our behaviors, 90% for most of us of our functioning, our behavior is shaped by what's unconscious.
yes,
And I
yeah,
think the power of what you're describing, and I work with it a little bit in different ways with ritual and ceremony, but the power of what you're describing is how to work with symbols, how to work with ceremony and rituals to be engaging that unconscious part of us and really in that way having a transformation that's complete in the whole being rather than just at the conscious level.
yeah, it's really incredibly powerful what happens when we work with it in this way.
Yeah.
And there also needs to be an acceptance of the person making the sigil that we don't have to even understand everything that this sigil means to you. You can't understand everything that this sigil means to you. And that all of it that goes in, conscious and unconscious, we're working with all of it. And so that sigil becomes our prima materia in alchemy. We begin with our prima materia. So that's what the sigil is. Now, an interesting thing that happens is people get very attached to their sigil. This holds such deep meaning for us, right? And so then the next step is to hold a ritual or a ceremony where we're going to burn it. And I always have to let people know, don't take a picture of your sigil. Don't keep a copy of it because then you are holding on to your deepest wound. And that is not something you want to hold on to. But we have this impulse to not want to quite let it go, which I find very interesting. It's very subconscious. So then my client will hold a ritual, which I guide them through to burn that sigil. Now, we want to do this at the proper time astrologically. We want to do this during the waning moon.
Mm.
And we want to do this during a time that's favorable in their chart for them to release something really big, that's really going to create a powerful shift for them. And so the alchemy and the astrology are always working together. They're always coordinated. They were this very, very connected sacred science in ancient times. And after they burn their sigil, this is another really important piece of the process. They keep the ashes because we're going to continue transmuting this prima materia. So now that the sigil has been burned, the ashes are the prima materia, but they've already been changed. They've already started to transform into something new. And we're going to carry these ashes forward. And at every subsequent stage, at the second stage and the third stage, we're going to do something different with them. A different kind of ritual using different elements. It was fire in the first stage, it will be water in the second stage. And those ashes, that prima materia, continue transforming. And we move up the ladder. And again, I can keep giving more detail at each chakra if that would be interesting, or I can summarize. But essentially, we're going to arrive by the end of the process at the crown chakra, the seventh stage of alchemy. And that the planet for the crown chakra is the sun, right? So we have the gold that we're moving toward. We're moving toward the gold. And the Egyptian guide is Horus, as you might guess, the highest
Horse.
consciousness, the light, the sun. So by the time that someone has moved through these 7 stages, they are transformed and they have transmuted their lead into gold. Now it happens a little bit at a time, a little bit more with every stage. But what's really incredible is by the time that people get to the heart, which is the 4th stage of alchemy, and the throat, which is the 5th stage of alchemy, they're really beginning to come into the upper realms of the work. They're really beginning to get clear on who they truly are, what they really want. The heart stage helps us to come in touch with our deepest desires and what we truly are longing for. And then in the throat stage, we can speak those desires more clearly than ever before. We can ask for what we need. And for entrepreneurs, the throat stage is really amazing because they can suddenly speak their voice. They can be more visible than they ever could before. These are some of the transformations that take place. By the time you get to the crown, you're really in this higher consciousness place that it's hard to even put words to. You're really existing in kind of a different, more joyful, more peaceful reality than when you began. It's really beautiful to see. And so then is the time to reflect and look back and see at this, the magic that has happened here as you have transmuted this lead into gold, and to see how that shows up in one's life is just incredible. I've found the subconscious desires, the subconscious longings that we have that we may not even know that's what we want, right? We wouldn't even know to set an intention around that longing because it's so deep in the subconscious. It will manifest and it will show up during these stages of alchemy, and the person will say, wow, I didn't even know I wanted that, but now I see that I really did. It's
Well, part of what's so beautiful about that, Jocelyn, is, and as I was saying to you before we got on the recording, for 16 years, I did in-person mystery school programs, and we'd work with those phases of the chakras and the planets. And it's a path of spiritual initiation
it
and
is.
transformation. And what's so powerful, as you're describing, is it supports us in remembering who we truly are and coming into alignment with the soul self. So it's no longer the mind saying, this is who I am, this is my path, this is how I should move forward in my life. It's burning away what would disconnect us or block us from that soul self, that inner light that is our true nature, to be living more from that alignment that is coming from the heart and the soul self rather than the mind or external conditioning. So it's very powerful.
Absolutely. And that is part of what we perceive as magic, but is actually just the way things work. That we know, each of us, we know that there is so much more possible, right? And we have these inner longings and these desires to do more, to become, our fullest potential. But we're told in life that's not possible for you, or you're not good at that, or whatever it might be. And it's hard to overcome that. But when we're working with the subconscious levels and allowing them to be freed up, then we expand in ways that we didn't even know we could do. And we perceive it as magic, or we perceive it as a miracle, but it was in us all along. And we're just connecting with that truth that was always there.
And that path of living in higher consciousness that was a part of our human history, but we've forgotten and got caught in that disconnection and that density of this third dimensional reality and linear time that pulls us out of that. So, a lot of what you're doing with this alchemical process is not only burning away the internal blocks, but clearing the conditioning that would
Mhm.
keep us in that state of disconnection and
Yes.
disbelief.
Yes. And that speaks back to what you said earlier about bringing our own desires and our will back into alignment with the cosmic will. Because we are each born with a plan, with a birth chart, with this beautiful blueprint of all that we came here to do and all that we came here to be. And the more that we can surrender to our highest self, right? Rather than the ego saying, I should be this, or the external societal influence saying, I should be that, but surrendering to who we really are, to who we really came here to be, then we are putting ourselves back into alignment with the original cosmic plan that we came here to do. And that is incredible. And that's when we're going to be living in joy, because we feel the fulfillment of all that we came here to do. That's kind of the highest state of being that we can get to live, right? When we're carrying out our mission, our purpose, we're bringing our light to the world, sharing our voice, in whatever way might be right for each person. So that's magic too.
It absolutely, and like you're saying, I mean, and we both see the astrological chart as the cosmic blueprint, and it's a reminder that we are these soul selves going through multiple incarnations, and the chart shows us what our intentions were, what our soul self knew we needed for our growth and evolution in this next phase of our journey. So the chart really helps us again come back into connection with that soul self. And then, and I believe that you talk about this in some of your writing on your site, that then it helps us to realize these challenges that we encounter or these themes in our lives are not random. They're not mistakes. They're a part of our own soul's plan to support us in our growth and evolution in love and wisdom. And then we can, as you said earlier so beautifully, work with those energies to be in that process of growth and change rather than resisting or feeling like something's happening to me, as opposed to we're in this journey of evolution of consciousness.
Yes, and our relationship with the planets is so important as a part of that. So as an example, when we're going through a Saturn return, for example, right? This is something that we have our first Saturn return at age 28 to 30, second Saturn return at age 58 to 60, third one at age 88 to 90 if we're fortunate to make it that long in this lifetime. And these are times when usually big obstacles come up. It can be a frustrating time. It can be a time where we feel like we're moving backward. But as I always like to say this about Saturn, I have a very deep relationship with Saturn after several intense initiations I've been through that were big Saturn transits. So, Saturn, we want to keep in mind this cosmic intelligence of Saturn. He only wants the best for us, he's on our side. But the thing is that usually at our Saturn returns, what's happening is we've been going along on this path in life. We think we're going the right way. We have all the reasons to think we're going the right way, but Saturn can see our highest path actually goes out over here. And so what he will do is he will start putting some obstacles, some roadblocks, some insurmountable, things over here on the path that is not the truest highest path because he's trying to divert us to the highest one. And so then when we find ourselves in that situation of the Saturn return, it's very frustrating. It's very confusing because we thought we were doing fine over here. And it can be really, a very difficult time in our lives. But there's a big difference if you approach it from being in resistance and like, no, I got to get through these obstacles. I got to break through to the other side of this, right? Still trying to force your way down the not highest path versus if you can be in conversations with Saturn and say, Saturn, thank you for the help that you're sending me. I don't understand it, but I want to, you know, and can you please show me what are the lessons I'm meant to be learning? What is the new direction I'm meant to be taking? And then the answers to that will begin to show up in your life and you can change course. And it takes a lot less fighting and resistance then to get over here and get on that highest path. And then we actually can get through the Saturn transit more quickly, or at least get to a more peaceful place around it more quickly because we didn't spend all that time fighting against it. So this is a key part of working with the planets. It's beautiful to also to work with Jupiter and Venus and bring in abundance and wealth and love. And that is an important part of astrological magic. But I feel maybe even the more important part is how do we work with the planets that, we might find more difficult to be in conversation with.
That's so great because I often joke that if I looked at my chart from that traditional astrological perspective, the planets that are malefic and the aspects that are the most challenging aspects, you could not design a chart with more malefics in challenging aspects. And for me, particularly with Saturn, well,
Mm,
not just Saturn, but what's interesting to me is, in part of what you're saying, is those Saturn returns then, from my perspective, become a kind of cosmic chiropractic treatment. If you're out of alignment, Saturn associated with the skeletal system will help you get back in alignment.
yeah,
But
I love that.
and I love what you're saying too, because when we can journey to the planets and be in communication with them, they'll have individual messages for each of us
Absolutely.
and be in relationship with us to guide us through these challenges or obstacles in our path. But
Mhm.
I do see Saturn a little bit differently than you do, in that
Oh, interesting.
I think in the most ancient understandings that we have of Saturn, like the myths coming out of ancient Sumer,
Mm,
where Saturn is the god of the sweet waters who knows how to move between the worlds. So I actually see Saturn as the inner shaman,
mhm,
and that we get caught in these blocks and struggles when we're out of alignment. But that Saturn also is the planet that guides us to real, he is the planet at that threshold between visible and invisible reality. So he guides us in how to be a soul self, how to come into form, but hold it lightly and know that we are in this experience to be experiencing the full extent of being in this dimension, but we can still remember we're a soul self, that we're part of infinity. So I think Saturn can help us also understand this experience in third dimensional reality as sacred,
mhm,
sacred experience of our being a fractal expression of cosmic consciousness and that creativity. But we tend to get caught in that density and get ourselves caught in our own blocks And that's when Saturn needs to get us back in alignment.
Yes. Yes, I love that. I like seeing the connections and the differences there. There was a celebration in ancient Rome called Saturnalia, right? And this is something that we have record of it in ancient Rome, but it was far more ancient than Rome. It was from the indigenous populations there, the original people. And it was to celebrate Saturn's day. And so Saturn's day is Saturday. That's our most fun day. How interesting, right? And Saturnalia, at least my understanding of it on the deeper levels is that um, with Saturnalia and honoring Saturn, they were appreciating both the struggles and the joys of life. And this was a time to celebrate the joy and celebrate being alive and celebrate, as you said, being here in the physical 3D realm, because there is so much to celebrate. There is so much joy and beauty and ecstasy that we can find here. So Saturnalia was a celebration of that. And we can think of it today, now every Saturday, we honor Saturn. We can tune in with Saturn and celebrate having a day off work. Wow, it's great.
You're touching on that, I think is so great, Jocelyn, because we also have planets associated with each day of the week.
Yes.
And I remember at one point when I was doing a workshop with Carolyn Casey, she would talk about how every day she would take time in the morning to honor the planet for that day, which again is another way of deepening that relationship with the planets so that we're not just thinking about them or engaging with them in a left brain way, but engaging them in that more relational right brain heart way. Do you want to say what the other days of the week are in terms of the planet?
Sure. Yeah, I will. And this is actually a key piece of astrological magic, that there are certain days and even certain hours in each day that are
Yes.
sacred to each planet. And so when we want to hold our rituals or our ceremonies, we can plan it for the right day and the right time to be just fully in line with that planet. So yes, Sunday, you can guess it's the sun. um, and Monday is the moon's day. And then Tuesday is Mars. And I find that easier to remember in Spanish because Tuesday in Spanish is martes, which sounds a lot more like Mars. So in case that helps anybody remember, Wednesday is Mercury. And
With
Wednesday is a very important day to tune in if you need technological help, communication support, all of those Mercury themes. I feel that having a strong connection with Mercury is so important in this fast-moving technological world that we're in. And then Thursday is Jupiter's day. Very beautiful day to call upon the abundance and the expansion of Jupiter. And Friday is Venus. And this is Freya's day, the goddess Freya in the ancient Norse traditions, which she is aligned with Venus, the planet. So I find it easier to remember that way as well. And then
And
Saturday,
that's the day to really work on relationship issues or to do ceremony around relationships. Yeah.
yes, to call in your sacred union partner if that's something you're seeking. Yes.
Say a little bit more, Jocelyn. You were talking before about sort of this tradition that alchemy and astrology used to be very blended, and that the Arabic astrology in particular preserved that. Can you say more about that? And then it is interesting how as we moved more into the Kali Yuga, the patriarchal period, the time of disconnection, then started to lose that deeper blending of
Mhm.
astrology and alchemy and magic. But can you say a little bit more about how the Arabic astrology really preserved that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will go back to Egypt just to introduce the idea. Um, And I will say, in ancient Egypt and really in many ancient cultures, Sumeria as well, the concept of astrology and astronomy being two separate things would not have made any sense to them. That would just be ludicrous. So we want to keep in mind, first of all, that astrology and astronomy were not separated as we kind of view them now. Today in the modern world, it's like astrology and astronomy, very different, and never the two shall meet, right? But that was not always the case. Really, originally, they were one sacred science together. And if we look at what was happening in the ancient temples, what the ancient priests and priestesses knew, again, this would be in ancient Egypt, in ancient Sumeria, in ancient India, many places around the world. They were constantly tracking the stars, the movement of the stars, the movement of the planets. And the priests and priestesses were also astronomers. That role, too, was one and the same. And often would also be the shaman and the doctor, right? This role was one because all of those pieces of what we today consider largely to be magic was a sacred science. Because if you think about it, it just makes sense. We need to consult the stars and the planets in order to know how to effect the best healing for someone, right? So this combines the astrology and astronomy with being a doctor or with being a shaman, bringing the healing energies in. And so this is very important to just keep in mind, right? That we were, and I know probably everybody listening, definitely you and I, Heather, and also all those listening, we have been these astronomer, priests and priestess, shamans, in the past, in our previous lifetimes. So this knowledge was very deeply held, and alchemy was also utilized alongside of these modalities that I've spoken about. Because alchemy is the piece that brings in the embodiment of it. It brings in the ritual or the ceremony, or making something into physical form so that we can work with it. And alchemy is very much about recognizing that there are many different levels of our awareness. Like as we talked about earlier, there's the conscious awareness, there's kind of mental, emotional, spiritual, and there's subconscious, and there's unconscious, And so alchemy gives us ways such as ritual and ceremony to work with all of those levels in a cohesive way. So in these ancient times, they would perform the alchemical rites, the alchemical rituals, which often involved the initiatory rites, the initiations that would be required of the priests and priestesses to hold mastery in their role, to really be able to work with the seen and the unseen forces of nature. And so they would hold alchemical rituals, and always it would be of vital importance to hold those rituals at the time when the cosmos was properly aligned to support it. You wouldn't want to hold an initiatory ritual under cosmic energies that are not going to support what you want the outcome to be. That would also just be silly, And so they had such a deep understanding of the interweaving of all of these modalities they could do. Now, this deep knowledge, of course, suffered quite a bit as the more patriarchal cultures and ideologies came in, and the temples were shut down, the priests and priestesses were killed or sent away. But as you mentioned, Heather, what's really amazing is that in the Middle Eastern cultures, and particularly in the Arabic language, this knowledge of the astrology and the astronomy and alchemy and ritual was kept alive. And there were many great minds especially in the early medieval period, between like 1000 to 1400 AD, that carried on these traditions and these practices, even when all the societies around them were no longer doing so. One amazing work, and I have this book right here, that came out of that is the Picatrix.
Mm,
So
mhm.
this is a really powerful book. It was written sometime in the 1400s, and this was a compilation. I believe it was originally written in Latin that was bringing together many different sources written in Arabic on astrological magic and alchemy. And it was compiled in this incredible book, which fortunately has been passed down to us and we can read. And I'll just make a note about this. It's very clear in the Pictrix that we are meant to be in conversation and communication with the planets. It's very clearly written. It's like at the core of most of the rituals and recommendations in there. So the Arabic culture held a really strong piece in, making sure that this knowledge was passed down to where we can now access it today. And that's really incredible. And you'll notice that many, many stars in the names that we call them today start with the letters AL, like Aldebaran, many more. And that's the Arabic language. These stars, the names we call them now are usually in the Arabic language. Deneb El Gedi, those are Arabic words. Um, Antares, right? So it's so interesting that Arabic culture had this important role to play in preserving these traditions.
It's so fascinating that we kept the threads of that coming through Arabic astrology, coming through some of the pagan and shamanic traditions. And it's interesting. I live near Salem, here in Massachusetts, where magic is such a big part of the culture there. And what's interesting to me is you also see ways in which magic has started to morph in the patriarchal period to, in some subcultures, become about the ego trying to have power and control. We end up having black magic or different ways. It becomes, how do I work with these energies to really have control and manifest what I want to manifest? Versus part of what you're tapping into with talking about some of the history of this, and part of why I love the experience of being in ancient Egypt, is you remember that ancient wisdom that knew there was no division between astronomy and astrology and alchemy, because they understood that everything is interconnected and everything is meant to be in right harmony with everything else.
Yes.
So the rituals, the ceremonies, the initiations were all about, how do we bring ourselves back into right harmony within ourselves, with each other, with the planets, with the plants, with everything, as opposed to how do we be in control and
Yeah,
dominate. It's all about, how do we come back into relationship.
that is so important. That is just so important. Everything that you just said. So true. It's so true. And a piece of that too, to add a little bit to it, is um, a commitment to keeping life around us in harmony as well, right? So we are bringing ourselves into alignment with the forces of nature and the forces of the cosmos through these rites and rituals. And also we are doing everything we can to uphold the continuance of life.
The
And
principles of Ma'at.
yes, 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 absolutely. And that is something that has been so forgotten in how the modern society is being run. But I think we're going through this big transition right now where it's becoming so obvious that we cannot continue down that road. So we will get back to that, I think, sooner rather than later. But it's important to hold in our consciousness, I think, this return to Ma'at, return to balance and harmony, and what can we do to support life around us?
Exactly. And I love that if there were storms or if there was cultural tumult, for the ancient Egyptians, they'd say, how are we out of right harmony? How are we
Yes,
out of balance?
Yes.
And how do we bring ourselves back into coherence? And it's so interesting if you look at the world right now with all the tumult, all the storms, all of the ways in which the earth herself is trying to alert us as to how out of balance we are. And that and part of what I love in the principles of Ma'at compared to, say, the Ten Commandments that are thou shalt not, the principles of Ma'at are I take responsibility to not harm the waters of the earth. I take the responsibility to not lie to others. It's about how do we take that responsibility to be in right relationship with all that is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a key theme, I think, as we're moving into the age of Aquarius. How do we come back into right relationship?
Yes. It's so true. I another piece about Ma'at that I find that is so inspiring and so interesting is the oath of Ma'at, which the pharaoh would say when they began their time. And there's a beautiful hieroglyphic, artwork panel in Abydos Temple that shows King Seti I when he was coming into his rulership as king, and he's holding this tiny little statue of the goddess Ma'at in his hand. It's so beautiful. And he's standing before Isis and Osiris. And he is making this pledge to them. He's saying the oath of Ma'at, and he's saying, thank you for this beautiful kingdom, which you have entrusted to me and which you are handing to me in perfect natural order and cosmic law, perfect Ma'at. And I vow on my life to uphold Ma'at in everything that I do while I am king. And I vow to hand it back to you. And he's saying this to Isis and Osiris, the great god and goddess, right? I vow that I will hand this kingdom back to you at the end of my life in the same Ma'at, natural order and cosmic law, that you have handed it to me. And that just gives me chills every time I think of it. Imagine if we can return to types of leadership that hold these kinds of values. And I believe with Pluto and Aquarius, we will. Pluto will ensure it. um,
And Uranus is helping us see the truth of where we're out of balance. But I love that. And the judges, as well as the pharaohs, would have to pledge, I will live in Ma'at, by Ma'at, with Ma'at. And then if they were going in directions that were out of balance, they would be removed from leadership. Can you imagine if we lived in a world that operated that way?
yeah. Yes. What a different world it would be.
So before we stop, Jocelyn, how do you think? I mean, you're in a beautiful way reweaving, reclaiming that ancient wisdom, bringing it back into integration with astrology, and we're both trying to do that in our own
As
ways.
as you are too. Yes.
How do you see? I mean, what is some of your intuitive sense of how astrology, as we move into the Aquarian age, will morph and reintegrate some of these aspects that have been lost?
Yeah, I love that question. I do think a lot of it's been some of the pieces we touched on today. I really do believe that this developing a relationship with the planets, being in communication with the planets and the stars is a key and important aspect of that, because it takes us out of this place of like the astrological chart is these mathematical calculations that's going to tell your fate, or it's going to, tell your personality. I like to say that the birth chart is not a personality test. It is your magical blueprint of what you came here to do,
Mm.
right? And so this is a huge part, is developing those conversations, communications, relationships with these cosmic intelligences, and really seeing them as that. It's not just a dense ball of gas in the sky. It has intelligence, just like this mountain that called me to New Mexico, just like this beautiful hummingbird outside my window. These are these incredible intelligences, and they hold a different type of knowing than we do, but just as powerful, right? Just as and we can be in this amazing relationship with the stars and planets in that way. And I do believe that evolutionary astrology, and I love reading the books by Jeffrey Wolf Green. I think these are really leading us in the right direction. He was very tuned into this Aquarian influence and seeing the path of our evolution as a soul,
Yes.
and that we do go through initiations in this lifetime, and they have purpose and they have meaning and they are important. And the planets are all helping to guide us to our highest iteration of who we came here to be. Um, I find that really important as well. That Jeffrey Wolf Green has this incredible book on Uranus that's called Freedom from the Known, that I highly recommend to everybody, especially now as Uranus is having such a strong influence on us right now. Um, we are so guided by these forces. And so, there's an Aquarian piece here about part of the Aquarian shifts and movements that we're going to see is coming back into an acknowledgement that every one of us as individuals is meant to be unique. We're each meant to be different. We're each meant to carry our own unique genius. We do not have to be the same. And in fact, I think that being different and being, having your own unique ideas is becoming more and more valued among the young people. I think we talked about that last time we chatted, Heather. And so that is expanding in our world. And then what if we expand that out to the planets, to realize how, Pluto has these unique ways that he is helping us that are really, really important for us to know about. Mercury has unique ways that he's working with us, to see them each as these kind of really mythical characters. It's a very powerful way to work with them and connect with them, and then feel their relationship to us. One more thing I'll say about that is, to think about the ruling planet of your ascendant. For everybody who's familiar with your birth chart, my ascendant, for example, is Sagittarius. My ruling planet is Jupiter. I was just laughing with my kids the other day about how Jupiterian I am in all these really funny, kind of quirky ways, where I will buy too much of one thing for no apparent reason, but it's just the Jupiterian, it's like the too much is perfect. um, Funny little ways that we embody our ruling planet, of our ascendant. It's so beautiful to look at that and then see, wow, how am I actually, I have so much in common with this planet. How beautiful is that? There are all these ways we can deepen our relationships with them.
So beautifully said, Jocelyn. I think you're so seeing how we're being called back into relationship with the planets and the stars and with the earth. And we're being called back into that realization that everything is conscious. And I also think that we're going to move more into, and I too, Jeff Green is probably the astrologer that's influenced me the most in terms of that realization that we are soul selves having this human experience. And I think as we move into the Aquarian age, we're going to reconnect with some of that ancient wisdom that understood these cosmic energies guiding us collectively also. Those ancient cultures and the ancient Egyptians were so tuned into the processional cycle and that larger journey that we're in as humanity. So I think we'll reclaim some of that astrological wisdom that we've lost connection with. And I think we'll also move from staring at these charts to coming back into connection with the sky and visual astrology and being back in relationship with the sky and where the planets are in the sky. Because again, I think it's all a call in the Aquarian age to come back into that remembrance, come back into relationship, come back into that interconnectedness with all that is. So it's an exciting time to be here and an exciting time to be astrologers. And I would love for you to just comment on this before we close. Don't you also see that as we attuned to these planets and their messages to us and their guidance to us, that we as astrologers can hold that vision and hope for who, as humanity, we are capable of becoming versus
Mm.
being caught in the shadow aspects of the turbulence playing out on the planet right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I find that it is magnificent what is being shown to us in the astrology at this time. It's not easy to be here as a human, navigating all of it, but it is magnificent. We have the Pluto and Uranus trine. And then in the center point of those two, we have the Saturn Neptune conjunction, all happening right now and all throughout early 2026. And that Pluto Uranus trine goes on all the way through 2028. And these are favorable harmonic aspects, trines and sextiles of the four outer planets. I mean, this is evolution. This is the light coming in. This is our rebirth and a huge new beginning. It's incredible the way that we are supported and we are held. And it's really big, and that's why it feels hard and it feels intense, for us as humans here on the physical plane. But when we can, and I think this is what I try to share in my astrology videos more than anything, when we can tune into the bigger plan that is shown, that is revealed in the astrology chart and the transits of these times, we can see that we're moving towards something truly magnificent. And it all has meaning. It all has a purpose. So we are
Mm.
by no means lost right now. We are very much on our way to what we have been longing for and what our great, 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 great grandmothers were praying for. And not only that, but we get to live here now. We wanted to be here now because those of us here at this time who are feeling the call, I know again, everybody listening to this video for sure, we wanted to be here because we know how to navigate this. We have the strength. We have the capacity. We're holding the light and we know what to do and we're doing it. We're making it happen as we birth this radical new world.
And we are being guided and supported by
Yes.
the earth and cosmos. Beautiful, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for being in this conversation. And how can people connect with you to be doing further work with you? And I will put your links below, but why don't you share your website and how people can connect with you?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is through my website, and my website is wearesacredplanet.com. So that's WEARE, sacredplanet.com. And also on the Sacred Planet YouTube channel, that's my favorite way to share. I don't do as much on the Facebook and Instagram and all that these days, but I love to share on YouTube. I love to share videos as we're doing here and these conversations. And I love to share astrology updates as well. So lots of fun things on my YouTube channel. So if you come to my website, check out my free gifts. There's a lot of amazing things and fun things to explore there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the beautiful work that you're doing and the integration that you're doing and how you're supporting others in reconnecting with the planets and the energies of the earth and sky in this deep relational spiritual way. So,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heather. Thank you for this beautiful work that you are doing with the astrology and the shamanic work and helping to get this message of hope and light out to everyone. You are such an inspiration. So thank you for all that
Mhm.
you
Thank you. And thank you to this community and how we're supporting each other in together, co creating this new world together. Blessings and love to all of you.